Hello there, it's your boy Offie D here to bring you the best parts of the Great War mod for Napoleon Total War in this abridged campaign commentary. I'm going to be playing as Belgium, only really for the reason that when I clicked on them I thought that actually they're right at the front, in between the big warring superpowers. So yes, we should have a nice interesting time right from the very beginning if we jump into this little crossover between the French and German spheres of influence. So let's do it. Annoyingly, I realise in retrospect that I jumped into the campaign so fast that I left it on normal difficulty, which usually is too easy. We'll just have to see what happens. At the start you have to decide if you want the game to try and keep the historical alliances together, and I'm going to say yes to that because if Britain or France decides to go to war with us, we'll be in big trouble. So let's stick to just being at war with one big superpower in Germany, and I guess Austria-Hungary as well. So we start off here in Belgium, as it turns out, with a few troops and a few field guns. To our east, we're already at war with the German Empire. They've got a few troops on the border, but nothing significant. We're not going to get really steamrolled right away. The first order of business is to build a college in this open building slot we have, because without that we can't do any tech research, and of course there's plenty of tech to get in World War I, from trench warfare to Marxist socialism. It all sounds great, and yes, we can't research until we've got the college up and running, and then we'll have to defend it as a priority so that we can go on to invent things like machine guns and tanks and generally keep up with the other powers who will have lots of colleges to get them those things. I'm going to move all of our troops up to this bridge in our territory, or not quite up to the bridge, nearly there. That's not the only way into our territory, but it's the main way. It's on the main road, so it's a decent defensive point for now, and we'll start recruiting some troops back home to try and get something like an army together. In the very first turn, German troops do actually come into our territory down the main road, so it looks like we're going to clash right away, and their initial army here is bigger than ours. What I wanted to do was just take a step forward to be on the bridge, but there's this interception system in Napoleon Total War that I always forget about. Because we've walked near the enemy, they have the option to trigger a field battle to try and stop us from moving. And I thought, well, I'll take them up on this fight, even though we have a disadvantage. I just wanted to see what the battle system was like, basically, so I thought I'll go in with fewer troops than them and just see what happens. The battle will start with an artillery exchange. And this was actually not so bad, because while the enemy has twice the count of guns compared to us, one of their sets of guns was behind this house, which was deflecting a lot of the shots, so we'll be okay in that regard. Their other guns are in some trees, I think, which also deflect shots sometimes. Meaning we didn't really face any pressure from the artillery, and I just stood in our deployment zone, since that way we can use the trenches that you can set down at the start of the battle, quote-unquote trenches that is, these things that provide cover for our infantry. That way the infantry that are arriving to face us are at a severe disadvantage. They may have numbers, but they're just standing there in a field and firing, and we're slightly covered. So we should slowly work our way through the enemy and trade very efficiently. And indeed, that appears to be what happened. It was made easier when some of the enemy troops wanted to go and charge us, classic World War I style, but they got shot to pieces on the way in and routed, and then they'll just come back from routing and try it again. You know the drill, that's not going to go very well. On our flank, I noticed that this one unit appears to be just running at our guns, who are exposed there, and I thought surely our men will just cut them down since they're running at us and not firing or anything. But no, it wasn't quite working like that. It looked like they actually were going to make it to our guns, but in the end they stopped just short of them. Our guns are targeting those infantry, by the way, but they have some kind of minimum range, so they're firing way over the top of them. I guess it's because they're howitzers, they're more about shooting up and over things, like halfway between a field gun and a mortar. Anyway, that unit just randomly routed and goes off to the side, so we got away with that situation. We can just chase them down. As for the other units, as mentioned, they're going to rout quite a lot and then just come back and fight us again. One thing I found strange though is that while we were absolutely annihilating them, the balance bar remained in the enemy's favour pretty much the whole time. And even at about this point, when we've pretty much defeated all of the enemy's infantry, they still have more than twice our presence on the balance bar. So I thought there must be something that's really bad about our own infantry right now that we've just yet to discover. Or perhaps it's just something good about the enemy's artillery, since that's all they have left at the moment, and they've indeed got twice our artillery count, so maybe that explains what's going on. Anyway, as you can see, with the enemy's infantry routed, I had to run forwards with my own infantry to face the enemy artillery. Said artillery had started limbering up to move away, but they're still kind of waiting around by the time we arrive. We start shooting, and that's going to start taking them down. The guns behind that house go first. Then we went and got the guns out in the trees somewhere that I never really saw. They're out there apparently. They rout, and that brings an end to the battle. Heroic victory, a very cheeky way to start the campaign. Some of the enemies survived, so we'll have to face them again another day. I checked the stats to see if our own howitzers had done much in that battle, because it didn't really look like they were killing many enemies, but apparently they got a few at some point. I guess when the enemy were walking towards us in the bit I cut out, they did chip away at them. They're very inaccurate, but with very good range, the guns that we've got so far at least. I noticed I wasn't replenishing. We can't replenish when outside of our towns and buildings at the moment. I think the enemy can, in a curious twist. Not sure what's up with that, but it'd be nice to replenish anywhere in the field. The enemy army's still out there, so after it moved around during its end turn, I thought we'll go and try to finish it off. The balance bar wasn't looking all that favourable. I figured surely we can just auto-resolve this, because we've got like 5 times their numbers, or even more than that, including our reinforcements. However, I have played Napoleon Total War before, and I've seen that their auto-resolves can be absolutely off the hook in this game. So, with a quick safety save, I gingerly go for it, but in the end it was fine. The enemy army is still a bit alive, but I think it ended up walking off into French territory and dying, so that was the last we saw of that group. As for my men, I started moving south towards Strasbourg, where I could go across another river and just start annoying the enemy by damaging their industry. They'll have to spend some money getting it back to working order, so we're contributing to the war in some way while doing this, and I'm gradually building all the basic upgrades and buildings back at home as well. I've also concocted this devastating naval strategy. I recruited 1 transport ship because it's super cheap to upkeep. It costs something like 18 a turn. And with this, we can get 20 a turn in profit by raiding enemy trade routes just off our coast. So that's pretty good, an extra 2 per turn. We're guaranteed to win. We do our first research. It's the re-implementation of the mortar. This will unlock mortars a bit later, at least once we have the buildings. The main research we need to do is actually the trench warfare doctrine one. A lot of the generic unit upgrades and things like machine guns are locked behind developing trench warfare first. It takes a really long time to unlock it compared to everything else because it's so important. But we're going to go for it because we're going to need it, and there are going to be a few things we can do along the way to speed up that research, so it won't quite take as long as it said there. As for my army, which has now been reinforced with 3 extra rifle units from Brussels, we're going to keep going south, being a bit dangerous here because we're leaving the route from the east towards Brussels very open. But we're just going to annoy the enemy, damage their industry, and generally scout around, like right here using this damaged conscript unit or militia unit, to just go and see what the enemy have at Strasbourg. They do have an army that's bigger than ours, so seeing that, we're not going to be too aggressive. Going to just stand on this bridge here and stop them getting into our territory, as long as nothing happens up to the north to threaten us. What does happen is that my militia unit gets attacked by 1 unit of artillery. The enemy clearly thinks they can win, and given that balance bar, I guess that's why the AI thinks that. But I was like, there's no way 1 unit of artillery can take down 1 rifle unit, because I'd already seen how they were extremely inaccurate and prone to glitches. So in fact, we could just run right at them, taking perhaps a couple of casualties on the way since the enemy just missed all of their shots. And when we're close enough, there were these trees that are going to block the shots as well, so we can set up and start just sniping towards the artillery position pretty safely as well. The problem is, my guys aren't very good, and it looked like it was going to take a long time to actually defeat the enemy firing straight at them. So I ended up moving to be really close. I thought this is how we'll finish them off. The enemy were trying to limber up the guns, so they were just stuck there for a while, and we were able to get to point blank range and start firing. Even then though, our guys still just aren't that good. Not only did their firing rate seem to drop as they were confused by what to fire at, when they were firing it just wasn't really doing that much damage. Eventually a few guys managed to score a few of these point blank shots and start taking the enemy down, and once everyone worked out how to do this thing, we won pretty quickly, and that's going to be a heroic victory for us since we absolutely defied the odds on that balance bar. The game should be very impressed with us there. After we've humiliated the local German army, they decide to all come out to try and get revenge. So after sending one unit, they sent all of their units, and I was like, okay man, and finally fell back, and the enemy did not pursue, so that was the end of that. I thought maybe I could move out with my army and take the enemy down, but we still have a slight disadvantage, so I didn't bother, and that turned out to be a good decision because the enemy actually came to attack me, and my army is standing on a bridge, so that's going to help us out. And looking at their army, it's not really that much more powerful than ours, maybe it isn't at all. Since we've got those reinforcements I mentioned, our numbers aren't exactly lower than theirs, and while they have more artillery, we're going to have a definitive terrain advantage defending a river crossing here. There are two crossings on the map, a bridge and a ford, and at first I thought from the enemy's deployment they're going to go all for the bridge. You can see they're kind of facing the bridge with their line. But in fact it was the opposite. They immediately turned and all started rushing towards the ford. I guess they tried to fake me out, but it doesn't really work because I've already deployed at both crossing points. We'll just leave the troops already here and start moving the other group over to reinforce. While that's going on, there's going to be a bit of an artillery battle. We've got our one unit of artillery very faithfully pummeling away at the enemy's artillery on the other side of the river, and as luck would have it, it's going a bit better for us than it is for them. Their artillery is trying to shoot our infantry and just not doing anything, and we've managed to score a few hits on their artillery, so that's a win for us. And their other artillery unit, by the way, is stuck in a forest, not really doing anything at all. They started moving their first artillery unit, and we happened to kill their general who was among them, or their captain I guess, so that's going to help us out a fair bit. The enemy's morale's already low when they finally reach the ford, but we've got our whole army set up to receive them. There is no chance that they will get across this ford, and perhaps some of the men begin to realise that, because as we unleash fire on them, their units start just routing even at relatively okay strength. Even with that rout, it's not really going to help them, because the AI can't strategically retreat from battles. All the routed troops will stop routing and just come back. They'll keep trying to cross the river. So as the player, we don't have to do anything now, we just wait for ourselves to win, and the enemy continually pour more troops into this crossing. They're immediately killed, they run away, and then some of them will come back most likely, and eventually they'll stop coming back and a few will leave the field, but not very many as it turns out. Towards the end they sent their artillery crew to try and make the crossing, and that didn't work either as it turns out. You can see the huge pile of bodies we've created during the battle. The enemy have just been wiped out in this fight. They've still got their artillery in the forest as the fight comes to an end. I thought I'd have to cross to go and finish them off, but mercifully those guys decided to rout and just leave. I think it might have been because our own artillery scored a lucky hit on them eventually and killed a couple of them, so they just gave up. That's going to be the end of this battle then. Another heroic victory. Is this the All Heroic Victories Challenge run? Well, it is so far. In terms of the numbers, we lost something like 10 men. The enemy lost something like 1,000. It was an absolutely one-sided slaughter thanks to the river crossing and the AI realising or not realising that it couldn't make the river crossing and just trying to do it anyway. With that win, you might think that we should counter-attack, and normally that would be a good idea, but I was being very cautious. I just stayed on the river crossing, awaiting reinforcements who are currently almost finished with their recruitment up in Brussels. And as it turns out, this wasn't such a bad idea, because when we end the turn, the German army does have quite a lot more stuff in the area, and that stuff coalesces to come and attack our river crossing once again. A big army appears with tons of artillery and an actual general leading it, and loads of infantry, and it's going to incorporate the infantry left over from that last fight. Had the chance to intercept there, but we definitely don't want to intercept. We want them to fight us where we're standing so that we'll get the river crossing again. And here we go. We end up with a much more serious version of the battle we just faced, where the enemy this time have potentially enough artillery to actually demolish us even before a river crossing happens. We set up at both crossings just like before, but indeed we are being pounded by the enemy's artillery, and now that they have so many guns, their inaccuracy is less of a problem for them. They're going to be able to actually hit us sometimes and start inflicting non-negligible damage before this fight starts. All the AI needs to do is not cross the river at this point in order to win. They could just sit there and kill us. Artillery has infinite ammo, Handily for us, the AI doesn't know about that, of course, so we can start preparing to defend the river crossing knowing the enemy will try, but we'll need to keep some of our men alive, and they are getting killed by these enemy artillery strikes. So, the men who I intended to do the brunt of the work defending this bridge, which is where most of the enemy army is going, I'm going to have them hide in the forest nearby rather than behind their defences. I tried putting them on light infantry mode, which gets them to spread out, but I think that actually made being hit by artillery worse because you're a bigger target and the area of effect of each blast isn't that big, so even if you're compacted together, it doesn't matter too much when you get hit, and you don't get hit that much. After we hid our men in the forest, the enemy switched target onto our own guns and started inflicting some lucky hits right away, but our own guns aren't going to be that influential in that battle, so that's not a huge deal. I've got some other infantry who are further downriver from the bridge, hoping to snipe at the enemy's flanks as they walk past, and a couple of other units who are going to use the other unattended crossing point to go over to the enemy's side and make a beeline for the enemy's artillery positions with the hope of taking them out before they gradually kill us all. My men firing at the enemy's flank get to work, but I actually called this attack off pretty much right away because while we scored a few hits, the enemy are just going to set up on the riverbank and start firing back, and that's not what we want. We want them to keep walking over to the bridge and walk towards our prepared position. I quickly put everyone back into their entrenchments, ready to receive the enemy once they're close, and again that means we're being hit by the artillery. Some of our men aren't doing a very good job of using the entrenchments, as you can see, so we're going to micro them to try and actually be in cover. As for the enemy army, they're here ready to cross, but they are dithering about a bit. They wanted to reform before coming at us. I mean, they shouldn't come at us at all, so reforming is a good idea in that respect because it's delaying their very dangerous attack. At the same time, my infantry going up the other side of the map have reached the enemy's artillery, so now we can finally make ourselves a bit safer. That is, if my men can actually defeat these artillery crews, and as we saw before, our low accuracy will be a problem. We start firing volley after volley towards them, and gradually we'll take the enemy out. They are firing back at us, but artillery don't seem to be very good at close range. They're shooting into the ground and over our heads and just generally leaving us alone, so we can get away with this and start working our way through all of those gun positions. Meanwhile, here come the enemy infantry, a huge human wave attack across the bridge charging right at us. They can't really shoot at us until they've formed up on our side of the bridge, but when they're there, they're going to get shot from all directions, and that will cause pretty much every unit who attempts to do this to just run back across the bridge, getting shot again the whole way. So, yes, very low threat from the enemy here. They're not really going to be shooting at us, we're going to be shooting at them a lot, and their casualties are going to be massive. After the first couple of units made it all the way across and routed, that's really going to be as far as they can get. All the other units will be shot even before they reach our side of the bridge. Our attack on the artillery continues. We've started to get a couple of units, but yes, slow work due to our men being not very good. At least the enemy's men are even worse in that they didn't achieve anything. Look at the bodies covering this bridge, and that's not even all of them done yet. They're still trying to push across with more units. Some of the guys are stopping to fire, so they're trying to engage us from the bridge, which is even worse than just charging right across because they're really not going to be firing at us, but we're firing at them. At this stage, the AI's only hope is that we run out of ammunition. I guess that could happen, but it's not going to happen before we've killed pretty much all of the enemy forces. So yes, this won't work out for the enemy. It's nice for me though, because I don't even have to play the game. I'm not filming in the replay like I often do, because so far the regular battles have been so chill for me that I can spend a lot of time just moving the camera around and leaving my own men to do their own thing. As with our men fighting the artillery right here, not that they're doing that thing very well, but yes, slowly they managed to defeat every single unit of artillery. The enemy's infantry were of course wiped out, and gradually everything is routing, which causes the battle to end. And wouldn't you know it, that's going to be another heroic victory for us. The record is continuing pretty strong. It wasn't quite as good as the last river crossing battle. We lost something like 20% of our men, mostly to the enemy's artillery bombardment, but the enemy lost absolutely loads of stuff, some 2,500 troops. Their main force is totally wrecked. After this fight, my units are a bit damaged and it would be nice if I could replenish, but as mentioned earlier, we're unable to replenish in the field, while the enemy can, as we can actually see right here, we can see them replenishing. So not sure how you do that. If anyone happens to know how to replenish in the field, do let me know. I still didn't go after the defeated army to bring it down, and this apparently just tempts the enemy to go at it again. They're going to try and cross one more time. And because I know you ladies and gentlemen love to see a heroic victory, let's get them one more time, just quickly. So the only real difference between this fight and the other ones was that because of where the deployment zones were, I had to deploy slightly further away from the river, meaning the enemy could slightly cross the river before getting into range of my men, and they were even able to form up in the fort and start having a gun battle with us. So we're going to take some shots and some casualties, but it's still always going to be like 4 of our units versus 1 of theirs, and our guys are in cover. So the result of the battle is going to be a foregone conclusion once the enemy gradually cycle all of their units into that killing ground. I'm going to do the same thing again where I cross at the other crossing point to go after their artillery, and that's going to work out pretty well. Their artillery didn't do much in this fight because they were just moving them around the whole time. My men go up to point blank range, ready to do the work, and it kind of worked this time. They actually didn't just miss every shot, and we defeated the enemy in short order. Same thing going to be the case for the crossing point, of course. A few men finally rout and shatter at the end, so they'll live, but a very large amount of enemy soldiers were killed with minimal effort from our side. We lost about 40 men, killed over 600 enemies, and once again the German Empire in this area has been humiliated by our plucky Belgian force. After that, there is a small army behind us now, so there could be some consideration for going back, but it's only a few units, and in the same turn I happened to have finished recruiting a couple of units in Brussels. And I figured this 1 set of field guns and 2 rifle units should be enough to hold the crossing I was on earlier against such a small force. So with that, we're going to be safe. The main worry is that the enemy will go after my university and ruin our tech progression, so with just a few units covering it, at least that's going to be less of a risk. In the south, I'm finally going to relent and go away from my exploitative defensive position, so no more river crossing battles for these guys. It's time to move out. We engage the survivors from the previous battles. A quick auto-resolve finishes them off. Now the nearby city of Strasbourg isn't that heavily defended. There's no regular units, it's just got a few garrison units that we'll need to overcome. Not going to go for it right now, but I am going to make that my next objective. We'll try and capture the city. I'm being cautious, by the way, because we don't have any intelligence on what the enemy have. That's mainly why I'm never bothering to advance, or even right then could have gone for Strasbourg right now. It's just because we don't know what the enemy have, and I'm pretty sure they have a lot more than what we've seen so far, so I'm being very careful about advancing. Anyway, that's going to bring an end to this first part of the Belgium Abridged campaign for the Great War mod. And by the way, it's not all going to be one-sided river crossing battles, in case you were wondering. Next time we're going to start going on offensives and laying ambushes for our superior foes' armies, and we're going to be finding out the hard way what happens when you go up against German machine gun bunkers. So join me next time for more of the Belgium campaign.